Hello everybody, this is Oliver and this is Chaotic Bibliophile. Yes. November, nonfiction November wrap up. Oh my god. I shouldn't be recording right after the other one, but it's what we're doing apparently. All right. So, good nonfiction November. I read half of my TBR and some others I've carried over to my end of the year TBR. Both videos will be linked down below, and then some others I'll just have to read next year. I think I succeeded in all of the challenges. I'm sure you all know what Nonfiction November is, but just in case, it is a reading event hosted by Olive from a book Olive, linked down below. And it is all about promoting people reading nonfiction. And so if you usually read nonfiction, you can try to read only nonfiction or fulfill all the prompts or just say that you'll participate. If you don't read nonfiction, try and read one nonfiction book, give it a shot. And yeah, that's how it works. And so the 4 one-word prompts this year were capital, display, network, and fraud. So let's start with fraud because this was not what I was originally intending to read, and I find it very funny. And this is Transitions by Élodie Durand, A Mother's Journey. The reason I think this as fraud is because it is nonfiction, kind of. It is, so basically the artist and writer met the protagonist, who is the mom of a trans son. That's how this got made, through like the interviews, which is not the only memoir that I've read like that this year. However, at the end, they were like, well, fact and fiction merge. So it's more about delivering the message and the experience than being like accurate. So I don't know if I would, well, I know all memoiristic nonfiction involves a degree of fiction. I know this, but still, like, I don't know. I'm just saying. Anyways, this is about a mom whose son suddenly comes out. I think he's like early 20s, like around, college age. But I don't remember exactly his age. But yeah, he comes out and her whole world shatters. There is a quote here that I think summarizes really well what the book is all about. Is I thought I was open-minded, which is something the mom also says. So it's what I call like a witness memoir, and I'm really interested in looking more into the witness memoir, especially when it comes to trans people and like trans narratives. The mom is very confused. She does this thing where it's like, how could I have not noticed? She's grieving for her lost daughter and that sort of thing, and has a hard time adjusting. But the book cuts her some slack, but also it is all about like her own journey transitioning. And I think it does a really good job at portraying that feeling. It is accurate in the way it portrays the way the mom thinks about his son, and that means a lot of misgendering and dead naming. It takes her a long time to internalize that this is her son, and she gets there in the end. And it is really nice because it has these like informative, I think this is definitely not necessarily for trans people. It is for parents and allies, and it's just like for the general public. So it does have these because she's a biologist, so like she tries to grasp it from that perspective, and like a scholar, so she does a lot of research, and that is really interesting. And it's shown in those sections with the, oh sorry, I'm trying to find more, with the yellow cover. There we go. And it shows how her husband and her sort of deal with it and adapt. And again, it does ultimately have like an uplifting message. It's just that I don't know, if you're just coming out, this might not be what you want to be reading, if that makes sense. But I do think it's really interesting. I do think it just makes you broaden your horizons. It's like a different experience. It's a very particular experience, but a really valid one. Of course, having like a trans child, it will have an impact on you, even if you take it just as it comes or you struggle with it. So I did enjoy it. I did enjoy the journey. I think what I love the most is the way the graphic element really interacts well with the emotional states of the mom. And so I would recommend it, but also watch out for all the things that I've already said. It's also quite like plain, it's a quite one note. It's just her coming to these realizations and her feelings. And so it's a very internal, contemplative novel, but I recommend it, even though it's more fictionalized than I would have liked perhaps for a non-fiction November pick. Just saying. Then for display, I read Art and Fear, Observations on the Perils and Rewards of Art Making by David Baynes and Terence Orland. And this was just fine. I was a bit disappointed by it. I liked a lot of things about it. It's just like, it's more self-helpy than I would have expected. I don't mind that like it aims to help, because like that is part of it. I like that it addresses real concerns of like money and what happens if you have to be an artist and a teacher, how you make time for art, how you feel making art is purposeful in a world that is oversaturated with art and where it seems like people don't want to consume what you're producing and stuff like that. So I like that. I think it's very comforting, and I think the points it makes are sound. I think it's just like padded for content, honestly. I think it could have been so much shorter and it would have had the same impact and I would have highlighted the same part. So I'm actually a bit unsure whether I want to keep it or not, because I don't usually say, but like if you hear me be super negative towards a book or say like, oh, I don't know, I usually just get rid of it. As we've established, I have a lot of books. So yeah, I don't necessarily keep them. So I honestly don't think that I will. I think it's all right. I think it's better for younger people maybe, but also it does talk about sort of the rut of being a teacher and an artist, as I said already, which are things that are kind of hard to understand. It talks a lot about like life after artist school and whether art school is worth it. So again, it does address a lot of practical concerns. It's just, I wish it would have been quicker, I guess, or like shorter maybe. A book that I definitely don't wish it had been shorter, and I wish it would have been longer even, is How to Be an Anti-Capitalist in the 21st Century by Erik Wright, which I did read for the Capital Challenge. Funny story. Basically, I was reading this book during the Radical Book Fair. We went there with Cypher. We had a little stall. And at some point, this book disappeared. We didn't know what had happened to it. And at first, we were like, well, did it get nicked? But then we rationalized that would have been very weird, and also just kind of impossible because of the setup. And then we were like, oh, did we accidentally like put it in a bag when we were like delivering other books to customers? So maybe that was it. But then one of the people from Cypher actually gave me another copy, which was so sweet of them to do. This offers practical steps. So basically, the background of this book is that the author wanted to do like a tangible proposal about like anti-capitalism and how anti-capitalism can be implemented and why it should be implemented. He wanted to do like a really approachable text that a lot of people could read, but also wanted to produce a companion volume that would expand on all the sort of minutiae here, that he was like, oh, but it's actually more complicated than that, but I don't want to like pad a book that is supposed to be easy read for lay people. So he was supposed to release a companion second volume. However, unfortunately, he passed away from cancer before he could complete that task. So instead, he focused all his energies on this wonderful volume. I really, really love this. I think it's really great. I think the way it explains things is really clear, but it also goes quite in depth for such a short book. I think his ideas are really interesting, and they are sort of very reasonable, which is the reason why a lot of other leftists actually don't like this book that much. One review I read that I did find funny was like, oh, for someone who is an anti-capitalist, he for sure seems to like it or something, just because a lot of his suggestions are policies that would at first seem to support capitalism or like benefit capitalism, in order to slowly dismantle it. So, you know, take everything with a grain of salt. A book that I saw recommended as a counterpoint to this was How to Blow Up a Pipeline, which is also published by Verso, and it's all about direct, quick action now. And so again, different approaches, but I will be returning to this. I think it's really, really interesting. I would highly recommend it. I think it's really successful at what it set out to do, even if you disagree with some of the conclusions. The premises are all sound, and even if you only get that out of it, it is really worth it to read his sort of definitions of anti-capitalism and different ways of being an anti-capitalist and different sort of branches. There's a little bit of historical overview, and yeah, it's just really good, and it's so short. It's just such a good introduction. Highly, highly recommend. And finally, for network, I read The Lost Pianos of Siberia by Sophy Roberts. I do have a physical copy of this book, but actually I left it at a friend's apartment, and so I had to finish reading it online. Not online, like as a PDF, which is hilarious. But I love this. I buddy read this with Natalie from Curious Reader as well. Oh, I said as well because I mentioned I was reading Nana with her, but link to her channel down below, of course, as always. And we both love this book. This is one of the best travel books I think I've ever read. It might make it to my top 10 nonfiction of the year. We'll see. I read some really top-notch nonfiction. But this is the thing. Because of this cover, I expected it to be like a more straightforward history of pianos in Siberia. And that there would be like an element of like, oh, they got lost because of this and that. No. So basically, this author has always been obsessed with Siberia. She loves traveling there. She's doing a lot of pieces on the place. And then she befriends a pianist and in Mongolia, I think was it, because she wants to give this pianist a really good piano, and there is like a more history there. But I leave you to discover the details yourself because you should be picking up this book. But yeah, so the author embarks in this cross-country trip in Siberia to trace these pianos. Are they still there? Their history, who has them now? If she finds old pianos, she wants to know the provenance. And she just meets all these fascinating people who welcome her with open arms most of the times. She's just such a sensitive, open writer and person, and she just like really listens. You can feel her affection for the land, but in a way that's not exoticizing, or exploitative. So the relationships she builds with people are all so just honest and truthful and feel so profound. The way she writes is beautiful. She is such an evocative author, has a strong sense of place, but also is really good at incorporating her own memoir and travel experiences, and also the history. There is a lot of history in this book. It is truly a hybrid book, and I don't know if the cover is doing it favors or not. I don't know if because it has such a sort of serious cover that makes it seem like it's going to be like a formal history book, whether that draws more people in. And again, it does deliver on that front as well, but what you get is so much more than that. It's such a more human book than you would have expected. So yeah, I just loved it. It is a beautiful book. I really recommend it. I also read, or more like inhaled, I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. And this is celebrity memoir done right. Because it's not about her fame. It's about her relationship with her mother and all that entailed. Her mother placed all her expectations on her, and she manipulated her into getting into showbiz and wanting to always do her best and always wanted to succeed. And it was such a toxic, awful relationship. And Jennette is very candid about it, and she has a really good sense of pacing, the way she shows the relationship instead of. So here's the thing, I usually like my memoirs with a lot of like explicit reflection, a la In the Dream House by Carmen Machado, but in this case it's the opposite. It's like a window. So for example, instead of saying, oh, my mom manipulated me in all these ways, she just says, oh my God, I really wanted to please her more than anything because I loved her so much. And then I felt bad, but I wanted to please her, so I did this anyway. I was wearing this purple t-shirt and I was really happy because purple is my new color, but I couldn't tell my mom that because then my mom will be upset that I'm growing up and that she's losing me. And that is the level of control we're talking about. And so it's very deliberately constructed, even though it's like very straightforward in the way it's told. It has a really good sense of pacing. Chapters are really short but punchy, and oh my God, it was so harrowing but so good. I don't know if people often mention this, but you should be aware that eating disorders are described here at length, are discussed at length. So if that is one of your triggers, if you don't want to read about that, definitely do not pick this up because it is really good, but it can also be really harrowing. Yeah, and the last book I read, I should have ended with this book because this one I liked but didn't love. The Body, A Guide for Occupants by Bryson. I listened to this on audio and it was like such a good decision because he's a great reader. I love his humor and how he reads. However, yeah, so this is all about the body and it's supposed to go sort of from the outside in and by parts. And I think that would have been a really effective approach if it had been more about physiology. I think this book didn't know what it wanted to be, and then it started talking about disease and dying and our obsession with not dying. And also Bryson has an obsession with weight and how weight affects or doesn't affect your health and stuff like that, which is a very complicated subject and a subject on its own. And it used up so much of the book's room, and it just felt like this was just an author exploring his neurosis in terms of weight and in relation to dying and disease. And I was not in the mood to be listening to that, so I almost DNF'd it, but I did learn like interesting things, but also a lot of it has been debunked. He does talk about how like calorie science is inaccurate, and he talks about the history of these observations, so I think that is actually really interesting, but I was not expecting to read them in this book because I wanted more about like the physiology details and sort of more of the systems. I think he does a really good job at digesting information and then constructing it back in a way that's engaging and informative, and yeah, I liked it. It's just that at the same time I was like, Bill, are you okay? Because you keep talking about this. So that's like a minus. I don't know if I would recommend it. There are better books about the topic, certainly, but Bryson does have a very specific narrative voice that if you enjoy, you will enjoy the book. Just be aware of that. Don't expect too much, but it's like a nice informative book. I did learn, but I'm glad I listened to it on audiobook. So yeah, so that's it. Those are the books that I read for Nonfiction November. Let me know down below if you've read any of these books, if you like to read them after hearing me talk about them, and what did you read for Nonfiction November? I am really curious to know. I haven't updated you on my TBR number. I am at 711, so I've reduced my TBR by 9 books. That's the net thing because I have added a few books and then I've gotten rid of a bunch. At some point, I was almost at just net 700 and I was like, yes, this is going great. But then as a leaving present from my job, I got like a book token, and then when I was celebrating that I got my new job, that sort of thing. So again, not fantastic, but it is what it is. We'll start doing better in January, is what he tells himself optimistically. See you next time. But like, I leave you to discover the